So this is a good visual and I made this today. So I'll bow at the end of the stream, but it's super important because what you guys need to understand is like, why is hex staking? Why is there still an opportunity there? Well, part of it is because of this model. So when you go to the farms and you're looking at these APYs, if you click on like one of these calculators and you click the drop down to go into the details, you see at the bottom here where it says 100x farm multiplier. Well, I've taken a look at every single one of these farms and I've broken them down into this pyramid, and the pyramid shows you the multiplier bonuses for each farm. So what is Richard and the admin team really incentivizing, and what is the base floor yield that you're going to get? And the base is coming from your major 3 coins. It's coming from PulseX, Pulse, and Hex. It's coming from the PulseX Pulse pair, and it's coming from the Hex Pulse pair. And this is just the base multiplier of 100x. Don't get too caught up in the 100x number. Just know that that's your foundation of which the whole chain is built on. Right. This is, a lot of your liquidity is in this PulseX Pulse LP pool, and it's only earning you like 13% because it's got the smallest bonus multiplier, but it's got the most liquidity because the most liquid pairs this is the most liquid pair on the entire chain. So it was important to create that nice base with lots of units, so you could effectively come in and out with millions of dollars of value between Pulse, PulseX, Hex, and Ink. And so, okay, this is your base, right? These 3 coins, Hex and Pulse, PulseX and Pulse. And I think if you're just looking at this setup right now, PulseX and Pulse is paying 13.7%, but Hex and Pulse is paying 30%. And the reason is because there's about double the amount of liquidity in the PulseX Pulse farm in dollar terms as there is in the Hex Pulse farm. And so a couple things that I notice here is that, well, this 30% APR that's on the Hex Pulse farm, that's coming in close to what that quoted 30 to 38% APR on long-term Hex staking is, right? So it's like right around that kind of number. So that falls in line with what to expect from Hex. And then the PulseX Pulse is just your lowest yield that you're going to get, but it's the safest with the least amount of impermanent loss because they really are going to ride up and down together for the most part. Then next on the list is the second tier, which is these 3 farms are given 150x multiplier. So you get like a 50% increase in the yield that you're going to get if you go into the USDT, WETH, or USDC Pulse pairs. Notice how all these other pairs on here are Pulse denominated, except for this one, the Ink PulseX, which is a very unique and important pair in all these pools. But yeah, so these are incentivized because we really do want stable coin liquidity on the chain, and we do want to have some sort of connection to ETH because that's where our home is, right? Our home is on ETH. That's where all the liquidity is. So there needs to be a connector point to bridge back out through to get WETH bridge back in and out of the chain. So this is the second most biggest multiplier. The third biggest multiplier is the Ink farms, and the reason why I think these are so high on the pyramid is because you really don't want people to just take their Ink yield and dump it. You really want to give them incentive to put that against Pulse and PulseX as a reward mechanism to earn more on your yield, so that there's a looping effect. This is the pool. These are the pools that you're really looping value back through the system to really build a huge liquidity base and give people like a hefty reward for doing so. You needed to have something a little bit juicier than this stuff down here to convince these guys not to dump their Ink for USDT, WETH, or USDC and go into this pool. If these were reversed, you would expect that people would do that. But because they're putting Ink on top, it makes sense that, okay, the APRs are decent enough higher that you're going to keep people looping their value back through the system. And then on the top of the pyramid, obviously we have DAI with a 400x multiplier. That's 2 times better than the Ink pools. And this is important because this is what gives us stable pricing on the network. You need to have some superior stable coin value on the chain to really stabilize the pricing on the network.
That makes a lot of sense. And I like this breakdown. And I guess that would be the question is like, if you were somebody getting involved in some of this, like we already talked about, like obviously your base at the bottom, the PulseX Pulse pool is really the most safe one. But what would be your kind of you know, this looks like Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of, but like, what would be your like plan if you were getting into this and you like hadn't really done LPing before? Are you trying to make your way up this pyramid necessarily if you can? I mean, a lot of people aren't going to have the positions to do some of these things, you know what I mean? So it's a little bit tougher with some of them, but you know, is there necessarily a plan to like get up the pyramid, or is it just more of an illustration of like this is why the reward structure is the way it is? Because I like what you just said. Like, you want to create an incentive for people, no pun intended, but to keep the incentive token and then just keep earning it again. So I know I've heard Corey Geary talk about, he was in that Inc. PulseX pool before and started to get wrecked a little bit with impermanent loss. And him and Dane, I've heard like they're like not into any LP positions after that. So that's one extreme take to have, but
Corey just came clean that he's back in the Inc. PulseX farm, but he's got a clear cutoff level. Okay. And so that's what we'll go into now. So if I'm looking at this and I just got a couple $1,000, where would I put my capital? I wouldn't put it in the DAI Pulse farm, because if the price of Pulse moons, you're going to lose all your coins, and you're going to be left with stables in the middle of a bull market, and that's no good. Now leave that for the guys that have hundreds of billions of Pulse to provide there, because they don't care with what they end up in. They're set anyway. So let them do that one. But the Inc farms are where I've been directing people, because I don't think that there's enough meat on the bone on these two lower. This is for whales down here on the base, because if you're a RH Maxi, you don't even care if you end up with more PulseX, Pulse, or Hex. Like, you like them all. So like, you're just coming in there with like 6-7 figures, just trying to like take the least risk and get more of all these coins, and just earn that Inc for at whatever rate. And then, whereas like, you know, this ETH farm, if you like ETH and you like Pulse, I would stay away from USDT and USDC. That's just my opinion. But if you like Ethereum though, and Pulse is going to go on a ripper, well, theoretically, you could go into this ETH Pulse farm and get paid Inc to DCA out of Pulse and into Ethereum if Pulse overperforms. And that's what this chart has been saying, is like, Pulse is about to overperform and go up here and test 36% higher. And if it goes all the way back up to the highs and makes new all-time highs, I mean, that's a 300% move over Ethereum. You could end up with a decent sum of Ethereum, and that comes in the form of impermanent loss, right? But that's where you're playing impermanent loss in your favor. So you know, bottom of the pyramid and top of the pyramid is not for like 99% of people, I would say. It's just for like the big whale players. And then until the last third of the cycle, and then we can start to look at that DAI pool. But then Inc is like where I've really been trying to focus people. And so then I think it's probably important to just give you guys some context on how to avoid impermanent loss. And one, you know, obviously you can look at this chart and you can see that there's two major, well, let me say that this is Inc measured in Pulse. So you know, right now we're at about 60,000 Pulse for an Inc. It was as low as, you know, 8,000. So, you know, Inc has went up 600% against Pulse. But these are the periods that you got to try to avoid. Is you don't want to be farming during these vertical price moves in either direction, because if you were farming here, I mean, it could have been devastating as well if you weren't big enough. Yeah. And you could end up with all Inc, and, you know, but you could have made Inc the whole time and then rode it back up too. So I don't want to poo-poo longer term farmers, because that is a valid strategy. And Crispy Man from hexfire.io goes deep into this strategy in his paid group. So if that's something that you want to know more about, go check him out. But generally speaking, like, if you're coming into the farms now, you're trying to avoid these breakouts where you break out of a range. And you can see that this was in a range from January till February, and then it broke out. And now we've been in a range from mid-March all the way till today. And it looks like we're getting to that point where we're going to break out, to me. Because we're coming on the reason why this is different now than it was back in these past periods is because during this attempted breakout and this kind of move here and this kind of breakdown, is the difference is that Pulse is strong now. Pulse is actually moving, and it looks like it's bottoming. So it's ripe for okay, we can say the bottom's not going to fall out on Pulse. That's good. Okay, so now the Inc can overperform, PulseX can overperform against Pulse. That's what this chart's saying. So yeah, wait these range periods. So yeah, breaking out of this range, you don't want to be farming yet. So what I think might happen, and you know, I could be wrong, is we're going to break out of here and we're going to go up quite a bit, and then we may start a new range at a higher price. when we finally find a bottom off that and start that new range is where you want to set your LP position at that point. So, and finding that and being ahead of that, that's like why you'd come to like my group, is because we'll help you discover that early. So like I've been telling my people, like, be prepared to, if you don't want to deal with impermanent loss, to pull out going into this breakout. So I actually thought we were going to break out on this move here, and it didn't happen. So I was out a little early, but just a couple weeks later here, it looks like we're about ready to do it. So I was just a little bit early on that call, but
better early than never. Yeah.
So
what's your thought? Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
This is my last piece, which is like, okay, this is Pulse and Inc. And this one pays 10% more than the PulseX Inc. farm, but the chance of impermanent loss is a bit less on the PulseX Inc. farm. So this is that farm now. And you can see that it's been stuck range bound quite a bit longer now. And it actually, Inc. actually broke down. So you actually ended up with a little bit more Inc. and it's giving you more time to farm inside of this bigger macro range. So, I would look for a break of this resistance line first, and then like a close above it. And then, you'd want to pull, because potentially it could just start to go, Inc. could really start to overperform for a short period of time. But PulseX Inc. has proven to be much less risk of impermanent loss.
I think that I just wanted to say this, and I'll let you go, Ewok. I think that shows that the biggest thing you said about, we were talking about using Corey as kind of a vehicle for somebody doing impermanent or LPing like that. And I think that is the reason to have like a long-term mindset and a long-term plan like that. Like if you have somewhere marked out on the chart, like you just said, like this is when I'm going to exit this. I think that's parameters you do want to have set from the get-go. So yeah, I like that. I just want to say that. Sorry. Go ahead, Ewok.
No, you're good. At the same time, though, my thought with some of these is if you're going to leave them in there and park them, and you're not going to play that game, because you can make mistakes, just like trading, it's going to even out in the long run. If you're okay with leaving it there throughout a whole cycle, you're going to see it go up through all these ups and downs, and then you're going to see it come back down where it probably will even right back out. So, which is, I mean, I think that's the safer move if you've got the capital to leave it, right? That way you're not going to make those mistakes. You're not going to get in and out at the wrong time or miss a channel that could last months because you got out too early, where you could have been making yield the whole time.
Mm-hmm. And if you're a big enough player, you can be losing out like many 5 figures, by taking out. So, Crispy did that analysis, and as long as you don't compound your ink back in during this period of the cycle and you hold it for a year, you actually end up overperforming slightly. Yeah.
Yep.
We made some assumptions in that analysis, but generally speaking, yeah.
Right.